As confirmed by the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the unprecedented introduction and spread of invasive species throughout the planet is accelerating at such an alarming rate as to rank as one of the most urgent threats to humanity and life systems. And climate change is fueling this growth and expansion. In response, Solutions from the Land is working to facilitate the formation and effective functioning of a multi-stakeholder cross-boundary coalition that will work globally to elevate awareness of invasive species challenges and support cooperative efforts to prevent and mitigate their impacts through more effective management and integrated governance approaches. Our partners at the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture recognize the devastating impact that invasive species have on food systems and biodiversity and have joined with us in addressing this growing challenge. Thank you, Aika.
Invasive species are one of the most significant and quickly accelerating drivers of global environmental change. Current data indicate that there are 3,500 to 4,000 species globally that are classified as invasive, meaning they have or are likely to have negative impacts on ecosystems and economies. The scale of the invasive species problem is expanding rapidly. The number of documented non-native species has quadrupled over the last 100 years, and this trend is directly linked to the intensification of global trade, transport, and climate change. There are big economic consequences to invasions. Global economic losses that can be linked to invasive species now exceed $400 billion per year, and this number has increased fourfold every decade since 1970 because of the damages to agriculture, forestry, public health, and ecosystems. In agriculture alone, invasive pests and pathogens are responsible for an estimated $70 to $100 billion in crop losses each year. From an ecological view, the impacts are at least as bad, if not worse. Invasive species are a primary driver of biodiversity loss and have been linked to 60% of all extinctions and identified as the sole causal factor in 16% of them. They also fundamentally alter ecosystem structure and function. For example, invaders like water hyacinth clog waterways and alter hydrology, and certain invasive grasses can change fire regimes, leading to more frequent and intense wildfires and changes in forest succession. Climate change can exacerbate the establishment, spread, and impacts of invasive species. For example, the potential ranges of many invasive species that are disease vectors and those that cause major crop losses can be expanded significantly by climate change. However, science points to a clear path forward if we are to solve this problem. The data show that prevention and early detection are the most cost-effective strategies. In fact, they are up to 10 times more cost-effective than spending money on control and eradication efforts once an invasion is widespread. To help solve the problem, we need to focus more on strengthening biosecurity, investing in global monitoring and data collection, and implementing rapid response efforts to reduce the economic and ecological impacts of invasions.
One of the greatest challenges for farmers, ranchers, foresters, fishers, and pastoralists is not necessarily changing climate, although that's a threat, but the threats that come from invasive species is as big a challenge and a immediate challenge for so many of us around the world these days that it's risen to the point of being one of the greatest crisis points for us to deal with. Invasive species can attack us in so many ways. They're microbial, they're insect pests, they're bird pests, they're vertebrates, they're invertebrates. They affect so many of us, especially they can directly threaten the life of the crop or the tree or the animal. They can put us in a quarantine, which basically puts us in a situation where we cannot harvest the crops that we might have. Invasive species are found all over the planet and increasingly have become a great challenge for all of us. In fact, the accelerating threats from invasive species has pushed us to the point of trying to elevate this issue so that we can find more protection and more investment in dealing with our prevention, the detection, we call it the delimitation, find out how big the infestation is, and eventually the eradication, and then monitoring for how well we've taken care of that different invasive that might come into our fields and our forests and our deserts and our waterways. It continues to be a problem that many people don't quite understand, like the farmer and the rancher and the forester and the fisher and the pastoralist understand, because it's an immediate threat once it shows up. And our goal is to try and prevent them from coming in, but more importantly, to share with the community how important a crisis this is and why they need to be concerned and supportive of our efforts to stop them.
Greetings to you all, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this incredibly important issue. The Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, or ICA as we're called, was formed in 1942 by leaders from the United States, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and many other countries. We were created to be a bridge institution across the hemisphere. We are now an international organization that's headquartered in Costa Rica and with offices in 34 member states of the Americas. We're helping to bring solutions in agriculture, rural development, and food security. As the largest net producing food region in the world, the Americas region is vital for global food security, for trade, and for stability. ICA works closely with our 34 member states' ministries of agriculture. We also work with the environment ministries and with farmers, and most importantly, also the private agricultural sector. We're finding solutions together, sharing knowledge, innovation, and calling attention to emerging agricultural threats. ICA has been increasingly engaged in the issue of invasive species in recent years. It's of great concern to us and to our member states. From countries as diverse as the United States, Brazil, Ecuador, Colombia, and all across the island nations of the Caribbean, invasive species are a threat to our native plants and animals and to biological diversity. We welcome the leadership of Solutions from the Land as you have elevated the urgency about this threat of invasive species. We stand by, ready to inform and work with our member states about the solutions and to address this threat that is harming food security, biodiversity, and the livelihoods of people in the Americas and across the world. Thank you once again.
Please join us in elevating and expanding cross-boundary public-private sector efforts to harmonize and strengthen invasive species phytosanitary protocols and improve monitoring, prevention, exclusion, diagnostic, delimitation, and eradication work across the globe. We welcome your participation.